Hey everybody, we're going to run the table quite quickly in defining what a genre is and why I am using that term to describe a communication situation. So, genre definitions. First of all, classifications. They are simply classifications or categories. They are quick ways of being able to understand what something is in relationship to other items. So when we act symbolically, when we act through language, we act in a way that helps each other understand where things go. If we want to go to a movie, we want a way to understand what movie's playing where and what kind of movie, more specifically, is playing where. So a category of a type of movie is action. Another category is comedy, and we have fusions of them. But those categories of classifications technically are genres. So movies can be placed in genre categories like action movies and comedy movies, as well as documents. In the case of documents, we might think of short correspondence documents that we did in Project One as being a whole unit, a genre, short correspondence genre. The confusion here is that sometimes genre is used in two ways. It's used one as a classification, but secondly, as just a document on its own. So for example, technically a memo could be a genre. And why is this? Well, it's because it often contains different types or subtypes within its own document. So if we think of a genre, we think of it having, if you will, parts to it or different types. And an action movie might be broken down into another category or classification, right? So that's the same thing here. Short correspondence is sort of the uber umbrella genre. Underneath that is a memo, and memos can be done in two or three different ways depending on organizations you're looking at. So there are engineering report slash memos, and there are general memos that are used in most professions. Probably not the best idea or the best example, I should say, but it gets the point across that in this case, and for the assignment we're doing for this project, you are going to define genre in terms of a document. You will ask questions, however, on how that document circulates. And that's why we'll go through this very quickly to kind of give you the tools to do so. A second definition of genre is a structuring device for realizing meaning in specific contexts. Again, we're just going to draw out in these general terms how a genre or a genre system works. So we can quickly understand what is being conveyed because we have been around, if you will, that style of communication before. A memo is a memo. And what is it there for? Oh yeah, it's got these elements, the to, from, subject line. It's going to be more of an impersonal delivery of information. It's going to have almost checkpoints of protocols that might be followed by employees. It's that kind of thing. It's literally structuring a form of communication, and it's a device to do so. Thirdly, it's an organizational tool that generates social actions by helping one recognize the situation within which we function. Pretty much a paraphrase of what we've already been saying, right? Previous, it's structuring a device, or we're helping to understand how to do what we're supposed to do in a given situation. Now, we could have wonderful memes pop in here right now from the office about ways that things get screwed up, right? With reports, with memos, with, you know, even small genres. Technically, even when you write notes on a post-it note, technically it's a genre, right? Because it's a form of communication, symbolic communication through language that takes place in certain situations. Where do you put that post-it note? That becomes, if you will, the fun of doing genre analysis. So when professional technical communicators are asked to be consultants for companies, they'll go in and look at, if you will, the layers of ways that different documents are used and the context, the variables in which it's placed. So where you put the post-it note matters, right? All right. I think the biggest and perhaps most functional definition of genre is that it's a shorthand for a situation. And Amy Devitt's a great scholar within my field, and my field is composition, which is writing and composing communication, and cultural rhetoric, which is rhetoric in a given culture, the meaning communication strategies used to get points across to audiences within different cultures. And Amy Devitt, University of Kansas, she was on my committee, loved her. She wrote a book called Writing Genres. And she really delved into a lot of her research, doing research with firms and recognizing that really it's to know what to do in a situation. It's like the turnkey. I'm using my hand to kind of say like we're turnkey, literally taking a key and kind of switching it and the lock opens. In that sense, when you know how to use a document quickly and you know how to drop it in the right form and the right time, you've got that shorthand. It just lets you get to things quickly. Here's how you do it, and allows you to get to kind of drop information in. I'll use this word very gingerly. In some ways it works like a template, right? Because it gives you the structure. It gives you the who, what, where, when, why that you have to kind of, if you will, plug content into. But I want to be careful. Here's why I'm careful. Because a document isn't just a bucket to hold content. It isn't just that easy. It's more dynamic than that. And that's what we'll get at here when we do the next slide. We have 2 slides. We're out in another 4 minutes. The nexus between individual actions and a socially defined context. And we're going to look at this on the next page. I'm going to repeat the same definition because I'm going to tease it out next page. But it's a reciprocal dynamic, meaning it's going back and forth between what an individual is trying to construct and make for meaning and what the situation's pushing up against and saying, hey, or pull this way in terms of meaning. So you've got that situation going on, you've got the culture of the mini workplace, maybe the corporate culture, maybe the national or regional culture, that affects it. And then most of all, like the genres itself, like memos, well, you know, this is what you do a memo. There's, or if you will, a history that comes with it in a marketplace, in an organization, and within a nationality. I mean, memos are done differently in Russia than they are in America. All right, why to use genre analysis to evaluate a workplace document and situation? So why are we doing this unit? How does it help us achieve something in terms of professional communication, whether for government agencies, nonprofit groups, or for corporate settings? Let's think that out, and even small business settings. Genre analysis defines how media circulates among a group of people. So again, we're kind of going back to go forward. We talked about previous definitions, but what it does is it kicks up this sense of let's trace what is going to whom and when it's going to whom. And that's what a lot of good technical consultants are doing. They're looking at not only the document itself, but they're saying, okay, when was this document sent, or is it packaged with anything else? And we'll look at this here in an example. So it also gets us into how media is fused. Sorry, there'll be an example in a moment. When we talk, for example, about how letters historically preceded memos, that's pretty interesting, right? When we think about how now Instagram is trying to pick up sort of that TikTok phenomenon with Explore and how it's pushing the video formatting that used to be IGTV. You know, how, if you will, Instagram also picked up different things from Snapchat, right, to respond to Snapchat's threat. So we think about how genres fuse to birth out new points or new reference points. I think Twitter's changed quite a bit since Instagram's come on as well. So we're trying to define a moment. We're trying to map it. We're trying to say who's talking to whom, using what kind of document. And to define that rhetorical situation a little bit further, we need to define the documents and how they're used to inform the situation. An example here is an email. Finally, we drop to the example that overall explains all these points, but an email that accompanies a report. And, oh, it's followed by a phone call. That's so important, right? Because we don't often know these. We just say, oh, well, that's how we do it. Okay, that's how we do an email. And then we hit the send, we're good, right? No, we have to ask the next question, which is there anything else that is a follow-up? And what's the protocol at the workplace? So in some ways, you're looking at a package of communication. A package meaning it's got multiple elements of communication that take place to get the deal done. So maybe there's a tease email that initially consults with a supervisor or owner or boss and says, how are we looking at this? What's the timeline, if you will? Maybe not. Maybe the workplace just says, you're the starter. Maybe there again is the email now as we're serving up the report, and the report itself has some subgenres, maybe has an appendix of some maps. And then maybe we've got a follow-up phone call or other forms of media that are attached now in sort of a ripple effect. Maybe there is a marketing campaign, and this is CC to them, and now they, if you will, punch out press releases and social media. So that's kind of, we're looking at that package mindset. And now these next few points shift slightly right into the document. Let's get very practical for our project. But I want you to think macro, micro. So we are looking at package. We're still going to keep that in mind as we're doing this project, because let's say, for example, you're doing a grant proposal. You still want to think about whether or not there's an email that is accompanying that grant proposal. But the general burden for this particular project is to look specifically at that one document. I mean, I could have called this document analysis, but I would have been cheating the truth, which is that that document has to circulate within a context of an audience, of a moment. It has to be thought of as how it packages again with other documents. So now getting more into the molecular analysis of just one document, which is really what ultimately we're calling for in this project. Look at the wording and sequencing. Look at the mix of graphics, video, and sound. Again, in your case, only one document is required. Look at how experts and sources are represented in that document. Look at the match between the wording and the design of the document and its intended audience and purpose. So there are 4 things that are juggled, and that the diction here might not have been as clear as I'd like it to be. I might have line item these bullets as subpoints, but the match between wording, design, purpose, and audience. So those 4 variables often have to come together in that consideration, and give you one more, you know, just to say, okay, that's, if you will, more the functional and material aspect of analysis. But I want to look at sort of the social and historical factors you need to consider as well. And this is Amy Devitt's definition again. Now I want to break this down a bit. It's a reciprocal dynamic between your intent. You as a person, as an author, come at it with a certain style, and that's given. In the workplace, that isn't played up a ton in these kind of documents, but it's present. That's one variable. Another social, historical variable is the context of the workplace situation. If you're working in the office, scratch your head a little bit here. You're looking at Jim and saying, hey, is this real? Right? The third is the greater context of the region and the national culture. And, you know, we think of, again, the office is taking place in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So we've got a regional culture there, right? I don't know if it's a mockery or if it's a compliment to Scranton, but it's small town America or mid-sized city America, right? And then the national culture, what in the US is informing this particular style, might be an important consideration. Last but not least, related or pre-existing genres. And we think of, again, the letter preceding the evolution of the memo coming from the letter. And we can think again of Instagram and how it relates to other social media. So it's pretty important to think about pre-existing genres, because in some ways it can give you a sense of, oh, that's where it came from. That's why it's kind of maybe where it might be heading. So the good variable to think about. Okay, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and try my dandiest to turn this off. And good to be with you. If you have more questions, please don't ever hesitate to email me.